Okay, the next item is item number 7, application for a certificate of appropriateness for 817 to 1819 Madison Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District, docket number 14-8858, block 1383, lot 23, a Beaux-Arts-style mansion designed by Carrere and Hastings and built in 1892. This is an application to construct a rear yard addition, and this was initially presented on January 21st.
Good afternoon, morning, Commissioners, Edith Bellinghausen, Reservation Department staff. This is a building located on the east side of Madison Avenue between 68th and 69th Streets on the Upper East Side Historic District. This item was first presented at the January 21st public hearing. The proposal, as originally presented, consisted of a 2-story full lot rear yard addition. So at that time, the commission heard public testimony opposing the project because of the shared history of the building at Madison Avenue and the building at 35 East 68th Street, specifically the shared use of the rear yard. At that time, the commissioners also expressed concern over the size of the proposed addition. So with regards to the shared history, the Landmarks Research Department has identified the following facts. And found that the building at Madison Avenue was designed by Carrere and Hastings, constructed in 1892 for Dr. Christian Herder and his wife Susan Dowes Herder, that the property at 35 East 68th Street was purchased 7 years later for Dr. Herder's sister-in-law Mary Dowes Dunham and her husband Edward Dunham, who also retained Carrere and Hastings to design a house which was completed in 1901. That the garden is entirely on the lot of 817, 1819 Madison Avenue, and while 35 East 68th has a door at the ground floor that faced that rear yard, that building was constructed entirely on its own lot, and also that by 1922, the Madison Avenue mansion had been sold. The ground floor had been converted to offices and showrooms, and assumed a commercial character that was typical of that period of development, and therefore ending any potential joint use between the properties. The applicants are back today with a revised proposal. The 2-story addition has been reduced to a stepped addition. The 2-story portion extends out 15.5 feet, and then the rear portion, which does extend to the rear lot line, has been reduced to a single story, and the applicants are here to further elaborate.
All right, we'll reopen the hearing.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ward Dennis with Higgins Clay Spark. Let me just get a couple boards set up for you. As Edith discussed, the building at 817, 819 Madison was constructed, was designed by Carrere and Hastings and constructed for a Dr. Herder, who later constructed a building on this site. At the time of construction of 817 to 819 Madison, it was a mansion. It had a full lot extension on half of its property, a 4-story butler stair and a 1-story conservatory. It also had this other second conservatory element, which was later removed. By the 1920s, Madison Avenue was changing, becoming more commercial. The Madison Avenue building was sold, and the base of the building was converted to commercial. There was a circa 1930s storefront that was replaced under C of A around 2000, and that's the existing storefront, which has been used by Donna Karen for some time. 35 East 68th Street was constructed about 10 years later on the site of a former row house, and it did have a door and windows here that looked out onto the garden of the sister-in-law neighbor. also designed by Carrera and Hastings, but there was never any joint use of the property. There were no connections, and at the time of construction of 35, this was still a full lot building to the, on the south side. We have looked also at how these blocks have evolved over time, and it is the case on our block, and you have in your packages the blocks to the north and the south, that you get this encroachment into the rear yards over time. And you see that with commercial encroachment on Madison Avenue, and you see it with residential encroachment on the side streets. By about 1940, 817 Madison was commercial with multiple dwelling upstairs, and 35 East 68th Street was also converted to a multiple dwelling. So neither one of them is a single family residence anymore. And I think I will actually stop there, just to show the block to the other side, with the same kind of encroachments coming into the donut in different ways.
Just talk about the current context and the extensions along
Sure.
Madison Avenue.
Yeah, that's what we're showing in this series, is the extensions along Madison Avenue. A lot of these buildings become single-story, full lot at the ground floor, and that's something you see all up and down Madison Avenue. You also see these corner buildings get extended out, so you lose the sight lines into the donut. The existing condition within the backyard there is very hard to photograph because it's so small and constrained. But the rear of our building has been completely refaced and redone, both prior to designation and since designation under C of A. Wes Wolf from Morris Osmond Architects is the architect now. The previous proposal was actually a different architect, but I'll let Wes walk you through the changes that we made on the design.
Oh, all right, could you just speak to the issue of its visibility? It's not visible from,
not visible.
from any of the
No.
public ways, right? So not
No.
even from,
So you have a one-story extension here, you have no visibility in from the side here, and no visibility
Okay.
from Madison.
That's not true, that's not true.
you'll get a chance to, well, there's no speaking today, but, all right, we're not taking any comments from members of the public, so if you can please hold your voices. Yes, please continue. Yes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Wesley Wolf with Morris Osmond Architects, and I'll explain the details of the proposed rear yard extension. Need to set the boards first.
All right, if you can go through that quickly, please.
Sure.
Okay.
So our proposal is for a primarily one-story rear yard extension. The existing condition is it's a three-story of retail space currently that the Donna Karen store occupies. As the board said, in 2000, alterations and previous to designation had made to the context of all of the rear yard facades, the current state of them being very sort of contemporary stucco finish, clean-edged openings, and sort of frameless glass windows. Working in that context, we extended that language. These are the existing floor plans showing the court. There is a one-story garden wall that's existing, that's about 12 and a half feet high, which exists at this point about 5 feet off the rear yard lot line. Our proposed addition will be the same height as that wall, but extend to the rear lot line of the space. We're proposing a small second floor piece, which is shown here in gray, and it provides a small roof terrace off the third floor of retail space.
Right, and just so the commissioners know, the change is that in the photograph where you see the gray, the extension otherwise was all the way to the back, right?
The extension,
Right, the second floor extended all the way to the back in the previous.
yes. It was a double height space, 2 stories high.
Okay, and so it's been
extending
cut
all the way
back.
to the rear lot line.
Okay.
Yes. In
All
term-
right. Yes, are there questions for, yes, any questions? Yes, Roberta.
So, just to clarify, so you're building on the entire first floor and
Yes.
just a part of the second floor?
Yes, the shaded area in gray is the proposed addition.
So, but if you were able to see it vaguely, a little piece, where would you be looking? You'd be looking from the street, perhaps over that smaller one-story shed?
On the 68th
not
Street
Madison,
side,
but the other street?
I don't think it's visible from a right of way.
From Park, is it Park? What street?
It's from 68th Street, from,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
so, because there's a, like, I guess a little.
It's blocked by a one-story.
There's a one-story something?
There's a one-story building over there, but let me,
Or a one-story addition.
right, so when this was 2 stories, was it visible? And have you removed the visibility?
Not sure about the visibility at 2 stories, but there's this 2-story and 1-story extension
Yeah.
on the building at 33 68th Street. So looking over it, you can see, you might see the upper portion, but not what we're adding here.
You wouldn't see the 2-story?
No, that's
The
set
second
quite
story.
far. Yes.
All right, other questions or comments? I just want to note that, well, first of all, we have received some additional letters of concern, both by email, that we will enter into the record. One of the issues that had come up last time from public testimony was about this rear yard and whether it had a historic fabric that should be preserved. This was sort of an unusual question. Typically, what would happen is rear yard additions, as you know, the commission has routinely approved. We asked our own research team to take a look at this, and I think that was what was presented to us before. That, and I don't know, Michael, if you were here, but there was a presentation about the set of facts that we learned about the first building on Madison Avenue being constructed independently, and then the second building that was constructed, I believe, 7 years later, which had an opening into that courtyard, but then the subsequent history, which included the change to commercial use, I believe in the 20s, if I'm not mistaken, and that this historic district and its designation, Madison Avenue, actually recognizes the commercial nature of the uses along Madison Avenue. Are there questions for the applicant? And I guess the other sort of threshold that we look at is the visibility of any such additions, as you have already heard. And yes,
Just that we
Addie and
don't
the-
really know.
yeah.
I feel like that we don't really know about visibility.
right, because we have not seen any mock-ups, is that right? Is that, I'm just trying to understand.
Yes, and because I think that the presenters aren't sure.
Well,
Yes.
There's a one-story building on 68th Street that would block the view of our one-story rear yard addition, so there'd be no visibility.
Right, but as you move along 68th Street, can you, yes, please do.
I can have a site visit, and there is actually, there is an inset on 68th Street with a 1-story sort of vestibule, whatever it is, and then behind it is approximately a 5-story brick wall that's behind that, so you can't really see through that.
Is it a brick wall that's not reflected in the Sanborn?
But isn't it their wall? Isn't it? It's not their wall.
It's not.
Oh,
It comes
okay.
back to about here. And then in the photograph of
That's what was
the
asked, that
interior,
person should have been there, give it to reflect. that it's
here's what you're
users
seeing
not-
here.
Is that the brick wall, that red that we
Yeah.
see?
So this is,
Yeah, Yeah, that's looking towards
looking
the south.
to
This
the
is-
south.
All right, I think it's pretty evident. I'm sorry that we're not taking any speakers right now.
This is the extension.
Tell you if you really want to know. Right, you can see the garden on Madison Avenue and all the.
I'm sorry you cannot speak, but yes.
Through the storefront, it is visible. That is through the storefront on Madison Avenue. It is not visible from public thoroughfare on adjacent streets.
Okay. All right, and I think visibility for the commission is very different from necessarily the concept of visibility. When we think of this as a standard and how we've reviewed it is in fact from the street, so 68th Street's critical here, Madison Avenue. This is through a storefront. Usually when we're talking about visibility, there's nothing really intervening between what we're looking at and the street. So here, yes, you can see through the glass, but in fact, from the historic photographs of this building, there wasn't actually fenestration at that time. So I think we should just recognize that. Okay.
And just to make clear, at staff level, the owners of the building could make that visibility go away
From our perspective,
On the back of the building, the addition in the back that stops visibility. So we don't regulate it. It's visibility that has no regulatory significance for the commission.
Okay. Comments and questions? Are there any more questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. We'll close the hearing. All right, questions and comments on this case? Any concerns?
I think I just want to say that it's very difficult to read this presentation. I mean, I don't know if it's the nature of how tucked away this is or the fact that I can't make out what this presentation is presenting to us. I literally, I mean, I don't know what's new, what's old, what it looks like at all.
All right, yes. Sarah, do you want to sort of add to that and maybe...
Or is it so enclosed? So enclosed, it's
Okay.
difficult to, I don't know if I feel my perspective.
So again,
Here we go.
it's difficult to photograph because it is a tight space, but the existing condition has the form of a former bay, but this is a later addition that was commission approved, and much of this has been resurfaced under previous permits. So there's no ornament, although there is this form, and then there is a fence at the rear of the property, and then again a wall here from the adjacent building. And the proposal is to extend out 15 feet for 2 stories and then 1 story to the rear lot line, which is approximately the height of that fence.
So the fence was constructed to give the neighboring building a little room?
It would appear.
Yeah, I mean, their windows are on the lot line, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And there's no fenestration in the proposed addition whatsoever?
That's correct.
Because it's probably storage or something.
All right, and just, Sarah, I don't know if you can answer that question. Those stairs that lead up to it on one side, that's within their lot, is that correct?
That is within the lot,
Okay.
and that provides egress.
Yes.
Just phrase this, so pushing back another, was it 5 feet? All the way to the rear lot line there, past the.
Past the
yeah,
fence.
Past that fence. Why is that so necessary if it's gonna harm the neighbors so much?
Right, I think,
It's
yes,
not a Mark's question so much, but.
it's, right, okay.
It's okay.
If-
Is there-
Yes, Ward, do you want to answer that?
Why extend beyond the fence?
Why not just stop at the fence or the wall?
The owner would like to have, typical with commercial development on Madison Avenue, they would like to have the full rear lot extension. Remember that this portion back here has historically had a full lot extension, and this portion to the south here has that wall now 5 feet away. So we think in terms of the historic configuration of the lot, it's certainly appropriate to add back in this corner. Yeah.
Right, because that used to go up to, wasn't that 4 stories? Which-
This was 4 stories on part of it, yes. And there is a fire stair that runs up the back of the building there now.
So it's really about whether
Agreed.
you want to do that as a part of being neighborly. But I just, in terms of for the commission, I think we sometimes find ourselves in situation where we have lot-lined windows, lot-lined conditions that are really regulated more so by the zoning regulation and resolution, and I think we just have to be mindful of that those issues of light and air are not necessarily what we are commenting on in terms of appropriateness. There is no standard of appropriateness that talks about the impacts on adjacent light and air issues, and I think the Commission's aware of that. All right, yes,
So it's
John.
not within our authority to deal with that issue?
It's,
It's good.
It's-
It's not appropriateness.
It's not an appropriateness criterion. The commission routinely approves buildings and additions that block lot line windows all the time.
right, so the agency that really deals with light and air and lot light conditions is really the Buildings Department and the zoning resolution. Those set out those parameters. All right, yes, comments? Any other, yes? All right, are we okay with moving this forward? All right, so Roberta, do you want to read the resolution? Okay, thank you.
Okay, in the matter of certificate of appropriateness for 817-819 Madison Avenue, Upper East Side Historic District, application is to construct a rear yard addition. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural or historic features, that the proposed rear yard addition will not be visible from a public thoroughfare and therefore will not detract from the architectural character of the facade or the streetscape, that the existing rear yard incursions in the block have eliminated a cohesive central green space, and that the lot is cut off from central green space by the adjacent four-lot building to the east. Therefore, the proposed rear yard addition will not further diminish the special character of the center of the block, that the rear yard sits entirely within the lot of 817-819 Madison Avenue, and that the building at 35 East 68th Street was constructed entirely within its own lot, thereby implying the original owner's intent to allow for the future separation and sale of either property. That the rear yard was part of the original design of 817-819 Madison Avenue and was built 7 years before 35 East 68th Street was built in 1901. And while the building at 35 East 68th Street may have shared the rear yard of 817-819 Madison Avenue, by 1920, 817-819 Madison Avenue was sold, and the ground floor was converted to commercial use, and therefore there has been no shared use of the majority of the buildings, for the majority of the building's existence. That the separation of use and ownership at the ground floors of 817-819 Madison Avenue and 35 East 68th Street occurred during a time when the residential buildings were being converted for commercial use, and the storefront changes made to the buildings during the significant development phase define the Madison Avenue streetscape today. That the 2-story stepped addition will not overwhelm the building, and that the 1-story portion of the addition that extends into the rear yard will match the height of the existing rear yard fence, and that other buildings in the block feature comparable and taller rear yard additions in terms of their height.
Second? All in favor? Any opposed? This application has been approved.